Hey guys, Detectivefail here, or DF for short. Hope you're doing well. Back with another review, this time on atomicheart. Let's get started and see whether or not it is worth your time. For those unaware, atomicheart is an action RPG first-person shooter set in the alternate history of the Soviet Union in 1955. You play as Major Sergei Nechayev, codenamed Agent P3. Who works specifically under Dr. Sechenov, a renowned scientist who saved P3's life in the past. He is given an AI glove called Charles in the beginning to help him in matters of combat and non-combat situations. Together, the two will need to rely on one another to solve a major problem inside Facility 3826, the Soviet Union's foremost scientific research hub, where a lead engineer named Petrov has caused all the robots to slaughter most of the human personnel. Your mission is to find and apprehend him. And that's mainly the gist of what you need to know. I'll dive into what I think about the overall story for later. For now, let's talk about the gameplay. It's quite good. You have regular gunplay with a decent assortment of weapons to create from blueprints, such as a pistol, shotgun, melee weapons, and even energy weapons. I'd say more, but that's a surprise. The game gives you enough tools to not scavenge for ammo constantly. By endgame, I had stacks of bullets to use. Aside from the gunplay, you also have tech powers due to your glove, such as shock, telekinesis, freeze, and other abilities. A built-in scan mode to see weaknesses and containers in the environment. These can help turn the tide of battle by finding creative solutions to combat your enemies. Sometimes an enemy won't die due to conventional run-and-gun tactics. So, you'll have to mix and match different abilities to effectively kill them, like using a polymer's ability to slow them down and then activate shock. Freeze them to slow down their movements and hack them to oblivion. There are even defensive abilities like a shield to help you against pesky enemies shooting you or those in melee range. Sure, you can dodge, but it helps to have a shield too. These can be unlocked via an upgrade bot, where you can use resources you find in the world and from your enemies. The game isn't to kill X amount of robots to level up, so to speak. It's more geared toward scavenging for parts and unlocking new abilities and upgrades towards your character. There is even a crafting system in place, as well as to upgrade your weapons. Thankfully, you don't need to hit a button to select each item to loot. Instead, the game has a handy built-in feature in your glove to mass vacuum the materials. There are vehicles here, so you don't need to run to every place in Facility 3826, and believe me, the facility is huge. It's not extremely massive, and neither is it too small. Feels just right. The open world contains optional dungeons too. Honestly, these places are a good change of pace if players want to break from following the main story. Here, the optional dungeons pit you against puzzle rooms to solve, and some more mini puzzles. I only did one so far, but from what I can glean, it's pretty fun, and I plan on going back to the other places for the rewards anyways. Speaking of rewards, all of your weapons can be modded, but some weapon mods have unique abilities which can only be acquired in the optional areas. A nice incentive to complete those places in its entirety. You can see what a unique mod will change on a weapon in the crafting menu. This is a fantastic feature, making the combat fresh and not dull, using the same old weapon again and again. You can ignore it entirely if you want and play the game regularly. On the soundtrack, it's pretty great. The composers are Andrei Bugrov, Geoffrey Day, and Mick Gordon. This is the first time I've listened to Mick Gordon's work. He's pretty known for composing the 2016 Doom and Wolfenstein, the New Order soundtrack with others, but his work here in atomicheart is such a blast. It's a mix of funk, rock, and techno in classic Soviet-era tracks released in the 60s and 80s, and it fits pretty well here. There are some moments in the audio design where the music will be silent, but that's pretty rare, and I feel that could be a bug anyways. Speaking of bugs, I did encounter one instance of falling endlessly underneath the overworld and one crash to the desktop. A user interface bug not displaying correctly. These instances occurred I would say uncommonly in my playthrough, particularly the UI bug. From what I read online, the developers are already hard at work at fixing these issues. That's enough for an overview of the game. Now, for final thoughts. Gunplay, crafting, and powers, I think they're a good addition to the gameplay, providing a fresh and nice progression as you continue to become stronger. I only have mixed feelings about the role-playing system, because it seemed like I spent a good chunk of my time looting containers and enemies to upgrade my character's ability or weapons. I think a regular experience system with levels could have been a better alternative, but since the developers decided on the scavenge for loot, crafting and upgrading your character's abilities or weapons via materials you find around the world, I think it's a decent attempt. I was thinking they could add reward tickets or some other equivalent to let you upgrade your weapons and character abilities as an extra feature in the game to supplement the scavenging aspect, like a reward system. Moving on, I wish the game had more vehicles because the open world felt huge and not enough vehicles to find. And when you do use a vehicle, the durability is a bit low. It can take a decent amount of hits, but in my opinion, the degradation of the durability after hitting enemies feels too high. I had to avoid hitting robots to make it to my destination, and Lord help me if I see a small group blocking the only path forward. I'll have to run out of my burning vehicle after running them over. I hope the developers can fix the durability and make them withstand a bit more hits, perhaps 50 to 75% more toughness, and I'd be satisfied. And place more vehicles around the world, so you don't need to run so much, since it feels uncommon to find one. I kinda wish there was a quest log, or at the very least a logbook of summarized version of events that occurred to refresh the player on what happened so far. You can clearly see on the top left corner of your current quest, but looking through the menus, I don't see a section of summarized events. And this is also me paying attention to the story's narrative. The addition of a quest log or a logbook could have helped players comprehend the plot a bit more, so I can see other players getting confused in the middle of the game. The beginning and late game are fine. The game plays pretty great when it's linear with good level design, but the open world nature could use some work. I still enjoyed my time with the world of atomicheart, but I felt the game needed a fast travel system in place to go back to old locations instead of driving back, since the game doesn't give you a whole lot of cars. Aside from that, there's plenty of good atomicheart does well. I had plenty of Prey, the 2017 game, inspiration, and gunplay with powers. Same with Fallout on the alternate history. So the world building aspect I think is done decently well. In-game, there are cartoons and small animations detailing custom game overs and modded weapon demonstrations, using a cartoonish style, which made me appreciate the little bits. Speaking of the level design, there are plenty of puzzles here integrated pretty well. Not so much to be a chore, but enough for you to go off the beaten path if you so desire. What I love here, rather than other games that try to half-heartedly implement puzzles by using the same one again, there is no copy-paste here. You have plenty of variety to look forward to, and they don't consume much time to finish. If anything, the mini-puzzles can be completed in less than 10 seconds or less. The game goes further by including extra unique puzzles and more to complete in the optional dungeons. I won't say any specific examples because I feel it's best to discover them on your own, but boy do I hope you will enjoy it as much as I did. I should also add, each puzzle I completed in the story sections didn't reach the lengths of scratching my head constantly. All of them seemed to be reasonably well designed, not to be so hard, but also not too simple. I do have to give special praise to the optimization here. The game runs almost like a dream on my old PC with a GTX 970 card, so playing on 60 FPS and getting barely dips to 30 FPS during very intense action moments is a major plus in my books. Graphics options are also extensive, so you can tweak them to your preference. Your AI glove companion Charles is pretty cool. They grow alongside P3, and you will encounter moments in which it'll ask you questions and you can respond to Charles with dialogue options. Honestly, my playthrough without Charles would have made the game boring as hell without his candid commentary and challenging P3 at times to question the moral quandary and critical thought. This doesn't occur commonly, but when it does, oh boy, does the dialogue shine. However, there is an inverse of that. There are moments where I dislike the main character whenever he speaks and doesn't consider the advice Charles gives him and will act like a stubborn jerk to what Charles advises. And this occurs frequently from the beginning to middle of the game. And I feel the interaction between the two may make newcomers bow out of the game early on. Be that as it may, I strongly encourage anyone willing to put up with those interactions to bear with it, because the journey and ultimately what happens in the ending is worth seeing through. The first hours of a dysfunctional relationship between P3 and Charles into something more. Whether or not it's good in the end or bad, I'll leave up to the player. But in my case, I found their moments from the middle to the end game worth playing through. The beginning and end game have an amazing presentation and do a good job of making you become invested in the world and the events to come, and find what layers they're hiding beyond the objective of finding Petrov. Nonetheless, the middle of the game could lose player interest since there aren't a lot of moments that could impress players to a degree while they'll become further invested in the story. It comes to a lull, so to speak, but I think the final act does redeem the slow middle part of the game to refocus the player back to the main plot. In my 17-hour playthrough with atomicheart and after the end credits are rolling, I think the game has a lot of charm, personality, and heart. There is passion in nearly every corner, from how terminals give you a nugget of lore about the world, to the not so dead NPCs giving you more context on the facility's day-to-day before chaos struck. Has more than a simple antagonist. Yes, the game could use some work in regards to the beginning hours of P3 and Charles, increasing vehicle durability and more cars around the world, a proper quest log to not lose players in the narrative, and some minor bugs here and there which the developers are already fixing. And finally, the story, I feel, is in the middle of satisfactory and excellent. It's enough to hold your interest, but I found the world, characters, and subtle political commentary more fascinating. There are moral quandary questions and candid commentary from Charles which I particularly enjoyed listening to when they ask deep questions, and thankfully P3 embraces these questions with answers I found acceptable to move him from one-note character into something more of a proper protagonist undergoing development, and the AI Charles too. In the end, I believe atomicheart is worth your time, especially for those interested in an alternate history of 1955 Soviet Union with robots gone awry. A jerk of a protagonist with a great AI companion along for the ride, fantastic gunplay with powers against robots and more enemies I didn't expect. An optimized game capable of running almost flawlessly on a low to mid-tier computer, I think. Level design is great when it is linear, not so much in the open world aspect, but still passable to me. Excellent variety of puzzles and rock solid Russian soundtrack with decent voice acting for the English voice actors. So if you like any of that, perhaps atomicheart might be the game for you. Let me know in the comments what you think of the game. I should also add, before I forget, if the regular price is a deterrent, the game is also available in Xbox Game Pass and PC Game Pass. New subscribers can sign up for $1 for your first month. That's how I got to play the game. Just remember to cancel the billing early on so you don't get charged $15 in the next month. Last but not least, I also want to give a special shout out to some friends of mine. Won't say names, but you know who you are. Thank you for supporting me by subscribing. I appreciate it a lot. Anyway, that's enough from me. Take care, guys.